You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the August 7th, 2024 meeting of the Long Beach Budget and Finance Committee. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Good morning. This is the monthly budget and finance meeting. We changed the time and everyone is present. Myself, clerk treasurer, chief, Anita Remages, Joe Jodmans, Laurel Kaczynski, Trista Hudson, our advisor, John Walls present in the audience. So our first item is the monthly financial statements. I had emailed out copies electronically of lots of things, and these have been updated through June still, the projections. Is that correct, Trista, right?
The projections are in June, so it's easier to go to discussion.
Correct, right? And so those, didn't change from probably the last set, although we did kind of work on some formatting. Trista worked on some formatting items, and we worked on the capital plan a bit, although we still need to work on some expenditures in there just to get it a little more accurate. Do you want to add anything on the projections? I know, John Wall, you had questions. Those are more budget related, or if you.
No, just the only ones on the revenue expenses. I just had three things that I was going to ask you about. No big deal. The MVH on salt. I think we got salt in two places, but I'm hoping that I know we've got some storage fees that we're going to have to incur.
Actually, Mark's going to address that today, right? With cell farm discussion. Yeah, so we'll get to that.
I'm talking about the storage fees.
Meg and I have talked about the upcoming storage fees. Actually, those will start here in August. And then there's a set fee that will be coming here shortly. I believe it's like $30 a ton. And then starting in January, there'll be an additional storage fee for the remainder that we do not use. And then that fee will be subsequent to every month thereafter. So the goal is to get the new salt farm built in the month of October. I've asked Meg to add that today to have that discussion. Meg, Trista, and I have had some good discussions as far as how we can fund this barn. So we'll get to that here shortly. But you're right. We also increased the budget, I believe, next year, Trista, for $5,000 in salt, I think is what we added. So.
Looked like there were two places where you had salt in your operation.
There is two places, but those storage costs, I do not believe were budgeted when I talked with Tom about it.
Okay.
So we will need to just.
Well, hopefully we get that thing up in October and then we at least can start.
That would help. Yeah, that would help.
There's something in the general on the revenue side called reimbursements for 82 grand. And I was just curious, I'm assuming that's just a one-off sort of thing.
Do you know where that is?
It's on the revenue side on the general, not on the cash projections. This will be on your financials. It's no big deal. I was just curious. I don't know.
82,000?
Yeah. It's in something called reimbursements on the revenue side.
Is that the insurance check for the hail damage at the community center that just came in?
Oh,
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Oh, I was just curious.
I think it's in that fund, waiting for
Yes, that is.
disbursement.
Yeah, no big deal.
Yes.
This is a pretty big chunk of change. So. And then the only other thing in terms of the revenue expense yearly and then projecting forward, we've got the MS4 salaries coming out of the storm. And I'm not suggesting that that's wrong, but is that a conscious decision and should we keep doing that? I guess.
That actually requires some discussion. There's about 45 or so budgeted.
Yeah.
For MS4, and we haven't put anything there. So
Okay.
we need to discuss that.
I mean, I guess on one side of the balance sheet would be, do those salaries really belong in that fund, or is that fund strictly for capital improvements? And that's where you have.
Well, we only touched on this with Larry when he was here for the budget workshop, because I need to somehow, if we are going to put salary there, is it just a percentage? Is it based on what he can tell me has been worked on for him around? So, yeah,
I'm not saying we don't do that, it's just, I think it's something we had to talk about.
right, or we're gonna, if we don't do that, we're gonna put some other things to that fund.
Okay,
I think it's maybe seeded, which one it is, but,
that was all I had on the financials. I've got some other stuff on the cash and the cash fund projections and the, capital plan when you get to it. That's,
okay. All right, Trista, did you want to explain anything else on any financials?
I don't have any other comments on them for today. I think
Uh-huh.
we need to really focus in on our budget plan and make sure that we spend efficient time with that.
Okay.
I do have, Civic open now, if we need to check anything while we're talking today.
Okay. Capital assets, inventory and reporting. So Mark, that's that project that three of us need to get together on. I guess realistically, I think last time we had said we needed to do it and still haven't gotten together, so.
Yeah, just let me know a date and a time, maybe next week. We can get together in advance of that. I'll share the inventory with you so you can look at it.
Okay, yeah, if you could send that
Okay,
today or tomorrow, then we can review it before we meet, but we do need to meet soon.
Yep, Renee and I are reviewing it tomorrow morning, so my goal will be to try and get that off to you tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, perfect.
all right, I'm making a note that we need to get together next week. Great. Capital plan update.
While we're looking at the capital outlay, just a couple of things that have come up. Yesterday I sent out, the community center is asking for $8,100 to do some work on the masonry planters outside of the primary entryway to the building. I would ask that we look at the capital outlay for the remainder of this year, because it's on the agenda for Monday, to give the council some guidance that we have the funds to proceed with that, because I'll be asking for approval. And I believe Anita will be presenting that on Monday before the council. So that's one of the things. And then I got a couple more, but if anybody has any questions with that, I'll stop there for a second.
I think it's just really important for the community center. Doug Wickstrom brought up a really good point yesterday when they were talking about the different things that need to be done at the community center, that I think the community center committee works hard, and to just, Doug said, just to get one thing done, which would be fabulous. I'm meeting Joy tomorrow. We're going to go to the historical room in Long Beach and try and find some original photos, but they've been very diligent about making sure that they have what they need over there. And this would just be a small thing, but I think it would be very helpful if we could find the money to just let something get done at the community center.
I think that would be, so there's 70,000 allocated towards capital for the year. It did get decreased. That's the question, is this going to fall within that
It would.
outside of those projects, if we're not doing many of those projects?
No, it would be within their $70,000 that is earmarked for this year. So you have the heat pump that's on order, and I believe that's just under $16,000 or $17,000 for the heat pump. So that would be one of their capital outlays. And then this 8,100. In addition to the 8,100, as they get into this project, there may be things they encounter as they remove some of that existing masonry and that, where they may have to come back to us and say, an additional $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 of work. We just won't know until they get into that project. But definitely they are aware to stay under the 70,000 for the year. I do not see any other capital projects for the remainder of this year, unless another heat pump was to go out this year, then we would approach the council to address that.
I think we're still within their capital. My only question is this a necessary project, or this is just what the community center board is deciding to do? Because I know there's a good amount of projects on that list. and we don't need to go.
I think it is it necessary? You know, listening to the meetings, I think that it's just something, they put different things off the bathrooms, you know, I mean, different things like that. So I think it would just help in terms of they have the money and they've been pretty diligent about getting estimates for things, and putting up some things. So I think it would just, yeah, will the building survive without the planters? Absolutely, but it would be a good thing to get done within a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, that would be my only, you know, that clearly the heat pumps are important, and then just maybe analyzing that list. I know some of those other projects are more involved, and
Yes.
maybe
Just-
we're not ready to do some of them, and I know you guys probably discussed all this yesterday, and I should just watch the meeting, but.
Yeah,
Just a small note on that. It would be more concerned, that if we don't do it, there'll be damage over it, and that's the reason that we moved that up.
Mhm.
So it is important.
Okay, sounds good.
What Joe's referring to is over the winter when the water gets into those planters and that, and the freezing and the thawing. There's been some damage there that we're trying to prevent, additional damage, which will save us additional dollars in the long run. So the sooner we address this, the better, you know, for that building. So,
Okay, sounds good.
another thing I have under the capital is, we had an engineering firm in last week to look at the town hall furnaces and air conditioners. Just as a refresher, there's 4 furnaces, 4 humidifiers, and 4 what they call what are they? Heat recovery units, HRUs that are up there. The heat recovery units that are up there, all 4 of them, all 4 motors are froze up and they are out of service. The humidifiers, which are all 23 years old, all the humidifiers are no longer in service. And then on the roof, we have 4 air conditioning units. 2 of the air conditioning units are from 2001. One is from 2016, and the other one is from 2018. They're recommending, the 2 air conditioning units on the roof that are both 2001. One of them currently has a leak that we added 2 pounds of refrigerant to. We cannot find where the leak is coming from. Therefore, they're recommending that the 2 2001 units be replaced. In addition to that, then there will be work that needs to be done inside to put the coils onto the furnaces for those air conditioners. And then they're recommending that we replace all 4 humidifiers that are upstairs and put them back into service, and then take the heat recovery units out of service and do some additional duct work that will move the ductwork into the fresh air returns up there. And then I'm seeking 2 different quotes. I reached out to 3 companies. 2 companies have been responsive. The other company has not. I hope to have those quotes by our next meeting of budget and finance. But for now, I would say that probably somewhere in the area of $30,000 to $40,000 to do work on the HVAC for the town hall. The price is somewhat high because we have to rent a crane due to the location of these units on the rooftop, and then having to drop other equipment through the actual roof into the room above us. On the town tech capital outlay, I believe we had about $30,000 budgeted for that this year, and there's a
20 originally, and then 9's been used.
okay. And then there's a little bit remaining, so we'd have to look at how we're gonna come up with the additional money to fund that. Maybe we pull from, you know, the community center. Obviously, we're not gonna hit the 70,000 there this year. But I just want to put that on the radar for everybody. By the next meeting, I will have those quotes. It's a delay because the HVAC companies are not fast to get the quotes back to me. So any questions on the HVAC concerns for the town hall? Furnaces themselves, they're recommending, since they are all 2001 units, all the heat exchangers are holding up. They appear to be what they classify as in good condition. But they said we should definitely start budgeting the 4 furnaces upstairs to replace those. Their life expectancy is 20 years. they're 23 years old. So we're extending them, currently, but it should be on our radar in the next 2 to 5 years to replace those.
Mark, is this, sorry, I probably just missed this, but you're looking, this is for next year or this year?
This year,
This year.
this year. Mhm.
So a month or two ago, we thought maybe we would need about 5,000 for AC, but that all changed once he got up there and looked, right?
Yes, because we found that the heat handlers are all bad, the motors are seized up, the humidifiers are all out of service.
And
And
we just couldn't know that from being down here.
no. And then we paid an engineering company, actually Arctic Engineering came in, serviced all the equipment, evaluated it. They provided me with the years, makes and models of every unit that we have. They did a total assessment. We paid them about $1,400 to do that work. And we now have a overall assessment of all of our HVAC because we wanted to do that to see before we started spending money to better determine what was priority up there. And again, it gets back to the town as a whole hasn't had a maintenance plan in previous years with our facilities and that, and a lot of these units have gone unchecked for number of years. And now my office is trying to come up with a better maintenance plan as far as, replacing things, keeping things serviced and that, so.
So Tech Vents became our new best friend and worst enemy at the same time.
I wouldn't say they're gonna be doing the work, but they gave us a pretty good idea of what's going on up there, so.
So I know with mine at home, I do like a spring and fall, clearly, a contract to somebody come and check everything. So that just hasn't been done here over the years. It just hasn't been.
I've been doing it once a year,
Okay.
with the AC and the furnaces, but never as thorough as they recently did. There's been a very, very thorough job going through all of them. I mainly was concerned with the heat exchangers on the furnace as we get ready to go into the fall, so.
Okay.
So I'll have a better idea on that at our next meeting, but I just wanted to throw that out for food for thought. And then, the next on capital, we've been talking about this in previous meetings, is the salt barn. The salt barn, as we all know, again, is probably 30, 40 years old. It's deteriorating pretty bad. I plan on taking pictures, tomorrow to have for the council to kind of show them as well. The Public Works team has been clearing the area, doing a lot of the groundwork, as far as site preparation for the new building. We've just hired, Maple City Trees to do $4,500 in tree work there to clear the area for the actual building. Actually, they're actually on site today doing that. So that $4,500 is going to come out of the tree budget. We have $35,000 currently in there. The barn itself, we are estimating, and I will have these figures next week. It's going to be around $65,000 for the barn. And then I would say on the high end, about $25,000 for concrete. So you're looking around $90,000. I know originally when Trista and Meg and I talked, we were looking at a budget of $90,000 to $100,000. We're hoping to stay more at that 90 number. On the high end, obviously would be the 100,000. But as it stands right now, we're looking at around $90,000. We will have 2 bids from 2 separate contractors to actually construct the building itself, which would be about 1,600 square feet, about 40 by 40 is the size. We would go from a salt capacity of storing 200 ton of salt to storing 600 ton of salt. So then it would alleviate us having to worry about paying Cargill any storage fees to store salt, because we would be able to now store an additional 400 ton of salt. Aside from that,
What does the town usually store?
200 ton.
Because that's the max.
That's a max, yeah. Sometimes we store probably 230 or so, because we'll put some under tarp outside of the salt barn, but that's not recommended to do by IDEM and that. We do it in emergency circumstances, but we try to avoid that at all costs. Therefore, that's why we're trying to present the salt barn project so that we can start storing 600 ton a year.
Mark, would that solve all of our storage issues for the future?
Yep, I had that discussion with Tom.
Yeah.
I asked Tom, I said, if we're doing this, we're gonna do it at one time. We're not gonna look back and say, you know, did we make a mistake? Should we store 800 ton? And Tom's like, nope, we only need to store up to 600. He says that would be the max for us. He says this will be plenty big enough.
Part of this is a function of how you have to buy salt. He has to commit to stay in the state buying program where he gets the better numbers. He's got to commit to a certain tonnage. If you don't use it, you're still buying it. And that's what the problem is. If you can't take delivery of it under the contract that you negotiated, you have to pay them to store it. And that's what we're trying to do.
Are you trying to predict the weather?
If we wouldn't have had such a mild winter last year, we wouldn't be paying storage this year. We just didn't use as much salt, and we're committed to the state contract, when we, you know, engage that contract, so. So again, I just want to throw that out, that's probably where we're at, it's around the $90,000 to $100,000 number there still. As the capital free up this year. Septic update for the public safety building. Still don't have a cost relative to that. I hope to hear in the next 2 weeks, on our final permit. They reached out to us, we had to send in some additional letters. One from the building commissioner, one from our street superintendent. Both of those commitments have been completed. I did check on Monday and there were no new updates. So I hope to hear something in the next week or two. So I don't have any, you know, financial update on that one. But that is still planned for construction and going out to bid probably in the month of September, going out to bid, starting construction in October would be my goal. So.
Are you done, Mark?
Yes, that's all I believe on capital that I have, unless anybody has any questions.
I'd like to go back to the community center. We do have 70,000 and, because of the last meeting, we, put the planters first because we could get it in quicker and we had everything under, with the bills. We knew we had an idea of what it was gonna be. But also our top priority still is for this year, if it's possible, and I don't know. Like I said, so far you're talking about $25,000. There's still $50,000. And the main project for the year was gonna be to put in a handicap bathroom. Because we think that's definitely necessary in the building and it should be there. So, they've been working on getting some quotes, et cetera. But if you're saying that we're done and all we can spend now is that 23,000, then I had to tell the guys, there's no sense us getting quotes because the quotes don't last forever. And I don't understand if we do have the 70, why we couldn't get, the bathroom. I can't even tell you. I'll just make 10 to 20. It might be 10,000 and 20,000. Depends on the difficulties we come into with that. Because it's a older existing bathroom, but it's awkward in how to get to it. And one of the projects is we have to cut a wall into the hallway so there would be access to the bathroom. And so is that still, can we still pursue and get our quotes or are you saying that we're done with 23,000 for the year?
I'm not against the project and I agree there's a need for that project. I think it just comes down to leaning on Trista and Meg to tell us the other projects that have to have priority this year, which would be the septic system, the salt barn, and the town hall HVAC. Factoring in those projects, if we don't have to pull from other pots of money that have been, you know, assigned to other areas of the town, if we can still fund that project, Joe, then I would say we're good to go on it. But I think from what I've shared this morning, that Trista and Meg need to move some things around in the capital to make sure that we can fund what's left to do yet in 2024.
I also don't see, there's no reason to tell Doug and Larry to stop looking at it. It's been on the agenda for several months. And so I think that the sooner, and again, it goes back to Doug saying, can we just get something smaller done? Because they can get the estimates and they were encouraged to get the invoices to Mark and on the agenda for Monday so that at least something could be done. But I think telling Doug and Larry to just stop work on the handicap, they still need to get the estimates in order and those can always be updated.
And Anita, I'm not telling Mark and Doug anything. We work as a team. And I just want to bring back the news from the budget committee. And the problem with doing all the work and get all the quotes, that if all of a sudden we have to wait till next year, then the quotes aren't any good. So
You've got room for the bathroom.
something,
You've got room for the bathroom.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tristan.
Okay, that was the septic update. Anything else, Mark, on your end?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
This might be an opportune time just for me to run through a couple of things. You know, in general, with the capital plan and even the cash fund projections, just like any entity or home, you know, you want to see what you've got available in funding and then what you have in needs. So the capital plan is basically our needs statement. I had a couple of more specific questions relative to how much we've got allocated for those needs, meaning if you're at the bottom of the capital plan, we have total available funds, and I'm just assuming, Trista and Meg, that those are somewhat arbitrary where we pulled those from.
Well, no, they're specific, with specific reasons based on either current line items of capital in the budget or cash balances that are available. But there is a problem with the formula here in the last week that Meg and I looked at, we ran out of time to finish. In regard to the ARP line. So.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, so unfortunately, that's causing an error as we sit here in this meeting today in our total line number at the bottom.
So that line,
I'm confident that my statement here about affording the bathroom and affording what is listed in 24 is possible and correct.
okay. So if that column is additive, then essentially we don't have that 1-2. We've only got 1-2 less 479 maybe, or you're not sure yet?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
Well, the column is additive, so the total available funds on that page, you got 1-2-1-3. But the 479 may have to come out of that 1-2-1-3
It's a,
for available funds, I'm trying to say.
no, that available fund number in the ARP line should be a positive value.
Oh, okay.
The way we have it tied and connected in through the rest of the fund projections and then back into the expenses column, the
Yeah,
actual expenditures, a formula has gotten screwed up.
okay.
So-
No problem.
We had the full ARP value there to start with the year, so, no, we had a much higher number. I can pull a prior copy and just tell you what that number really actually should be.
Well, we can straighten that out. I guess from a 30,000 view though, when you look at something like the general funds contribution in 2024, you've got 87,644 coming to the capital plan from the general fund. And I'll just use that as an example because I know you've got boxes around some of these, so I'm assuming those are come from macros or formulas or something. But at any rate, the decision as to how much is used out of a particular fund for capital is kind of key for us, you know, as we analyze those.
Right.
So that brings me into the cash fund projections pages. So when I look at the bottom of the cash fund projection pages, and bear with me here, this will make sense after we get to it. You've got some projections for 24 and 25 for the general fund. And then at the end, you have, after your receipts and your expense projections, you have an ending balance of X. Okay, for instance, in the general fund 24 right now, and again, this could be, you know, stand up to some correction, I don't know. You've got an ending balance of about 958 in 24 and 738 in 25. As I look at those balances and the reserve ratios that they generate, I'm wondering whether we couldn't, if we have a year where we're in trouble on the capital program, which for instance, if you go to 26, you know, you got a $500,000 hole. which I'm gonna correct one thing on that in a minute, but my point is, it's probably possible then to increase something like the general fund's contributions to the capital plan based on what I see on these cash projections. Is that a
Right.
logical statement?
Yes, and those are game time decisions though.
Yeah.
So right now, we have not pulled from the general fund to have a solid contribution plan to the rainy day fund, for example.
Yeah,
And, something like the AC units now coming in at $25,000 or $35,000 higher than the five that we were thinking originally, that gives us the cushion room.
Mhm.
So yes, in the capital plan page, we've assigned the 87,000 because that's, for this year, for example. Because that ties up the plan. I don't want to though, for 25, 26, 27, put in a higher value from the general fund than what we have right now for those future years.
well, let me be more specific then on that.
We know that that's there, and so that's where we come back to as these decisions, as the year rolls and it flows and it ebbs and it.
Right, right. But some of these things have significant lead times. So, you know, near to my heart is something like the fire truck. So I'll use that as an example. On the capital plan projections, I'd like to correct that in one regard. The trucks generally, the way we find it now in the marketplace, you order it on day one and it's 2 years out before you have to take delivery. And what they've done on the one, at least the one we bought now, is that we don't have to even pay them a down payment. So right now, for instance, in the fire section on capital plan, the fire truck 2 financing is showing up in 26. In reality, that truck needs to be replaced before 29. So that expenditure actually could move forward. I'm just using this as an example, not necessarily that we need to do it today. But as we make these adjustments, I agree with you entirely that all these things are game day type things. But on the other hand, when the council gets this capital plan in front of them and sees things like the negative in 26, that's a little spooky if I'm sitting in their shoes. Whereas what they don't realize when they just look at this, there are other places where we have available funds if these cash projections are correct. And this takes me back, if I go to the 30,000 one more time, I know we've shared this sentiment before in my term when I was in office, but we need to have reserves. And that amount of reserves is something that's critical, but you know, as you go down through these reserve ratios on some of these, you know, and I don't pay attention to the tiny accounts. I don't think they warrant that much attention, but when you look at something like the general, the reserve on 24 of 64%, a reserve on 25 at 43%, 26 at 31. And then you look at, you know, some of these other ones, those are significant reserves in my mind. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Not to say that we don't have some funds that are in trouble in that regard, but, you know, the parks, for instance, talking about community center, but the parks have a significant reserve ratio. So I think it's important as the council thinks about these capital plan items, that some of those things, unless we need to correct it, Tristan, maybe I'm under some false impressions here, but I see some pretty significant reserves out in some of these larger funds as I look forward, which I think is a good thing. But as we make these gated decisions, then can't we use some of that forethought?
Yes, and we will. And we've talked about that, we've planned on that, but something like, two parts to my statement here. Something like moving fire truck number 2, if we don't need that in 26, then we absolutely need to move that over.
Yeah.
Originally, when this was starting earlier this year, it was our understanding that's when that needed to start. So if that's not the case anymore, then yes, let's move it.
That's not a good example of the overall situation, but it's one that I'm aware enough of to give you some information on, but.
And then regarding, and that affects very specifically the current shortfall potential in 2026. So as we're now coming into the end of 2024, and we see again where our reserves are coming at, then absolutely we will be able to increase the contributions. It's just a little early to go through and change all of the reserve ratios right now focusing into one year.
No, I get it.
So that's, your concerns, your comments are part of our overall conversations all the time.
Okay, good. And I don't know when to, some of this stuff we can just do at a later date. It doesn't have to be tying everybody up for the meeting, but, as I look at those cash projections and then what the contributions, what I did was I took all the, all the cash balances, ending year cash balances for 24 and 25. And then I looked at the capital plan contributions in those years. And, some funds are going in the hole. For instance, storm, we show a cash projection of 16 grand in the hole on the storm fund. And then we show a capital plan contribution for the storm fund of 261. I know some of that is
So again,
already done.
it lives and breathes. I've got to show, for example, in the stormwater, for the 24 projected expenses. Right now, they still have the 6, the 10,000, 3,000 in the budget for a few things. They're not gonna spend it. But until we go through the proper procedure of actually reducing the budget with the resolution, I've got to leave it in there.
I guess.
So I've got to leave the negative there to keep it on their radar, to know and have the conversation, and within the clerk's office too, to know that we paid, we've got money set aside for that big project, we can cover it. But that means that we can't spend some of the other money that was allotted.
Understood.
And
So,
because it's the budget there, I can't just take that out myself.
I get that. But as we try to, and, as this group tries to inform the town council about major decisions looking forward for a couple, 3 years, I think it's important to have them also understand this kind of information, because I think it doesn't do the town any good to give a capital plan that has these big negative balances and then have them not understand that we do have wherewithal that we need to also discuss with them as we make these decisions. So for instance, on the lit fund, you got a ending balance of about negative 21 with a capital plan projected contribution of 133,000. So again, I think some of these things we just have to, and I don't know when or how we're going to do that. And maybe that's what this group needs to decide, or whether we are involved with just
In
council.
that example, there's been some payroll adjustment in Civic between PERF and Social Security that will be adjusted very soon. That negative will not stay there. So some of these things are in process,
Yeah,
just not,
and that's,
not.
and I'm only, when I look at financial information, I look at outlier stuff and I think,
Yeah.
well, and I'm not trying to use these examples as indicative of any kind of problem. All I'm trying to say is, at some point, we need to get out of the mire of the details and start talking about the big picture, which is, in my mind, how much can we afford and how many of these things that we think we can't afford can be afforded. That's really where I want to get to. Now, whether we do that mid-year like now, or we do it at the end of the year, I think it's important to do. And and it's a little difficult at a council meeting, town council meeting, to do those kinds of things. Number one, you have to have people that understand both sides of that equation, and then you also have to have the time to do it. So I would like to ask this group, or particularly, the clerk's office and Trista, when we should do that, but I'd like to see it happen, sometime in the pretty near future, because it's pretty critical to some of these things. Joe's bathroom example is one thing, but you start talking 6-figure things, we need to plan a couple of years out. We can't. So I know I'm a bit of a thorn this morning, but.
No, I think all those things you mentioned, we are aware of and working on. So, yeah, but, I do think this was good just for me with cash balances, just to understand it, so.
So
There
it
is
is fire truck number 2 needing to start.
I would say, well, ideally, from my perspective, if we could try to order that thing in 26 and pay for it in 28, that would be the way. That would be it, because then it's replaced before it runs completely out of.
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I had a question from Blake that it was more urgent than that, that they needed to get it ordered next year.
No, we just had a big fire meeting about this. I know where I speak.
It was brought up,
Yeah,
like, in the last month.
So not needing to pay till 28.
I think you could, unless the suppliers change their tune. Our experience is that they don't require down payment, and we know that we don't have to. If you can do it sooner, fine. I'm not suggesting we should do it sooner if we can afford it.
It would be helpful if we didn't have to do it until 28. That would work out much better.
Yeah, I think in our recent conversations with Blake, that's appropriate. And the only thing we have to sign is a financial commitment letter indicating when we order it, that once they start building it, we take delivery of it.
Just as an aside here, this is anecdotal more than anything else, but the council does need to get their ducks in a row on the financing for the truck that's coming in 26. Because we haven't done, I'm sorry, 25, we haven't done that yet.
Carlos got it on the schedule.
We need to get that on, you know, sometime before that truck shows up, we did ever.
But it's in the plan. Like,
Yes, we're fine, yes.
I pay more. You're talking the actual.
I have a whole bunch of stuff in the cash fund projections in a bunch of the accounts that I don't want to burden the group with. I'll just get with you two later on at some future date. Just a few questions, no big deal. Just some line items that look like 1 year it's here and the next year it's there. And I just want to make sure we're doing the correct thing, you know, just out there. I mean, for instance,
Plot interest and.
yeah. And again,
The only thing is we just have to get to the budget too, so.
yeah, well, I'm done. I'll come and talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, we can set something up. It's fine.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We're on the budget, so. What's the best way to tackle what we want to accomplish today?
I really think, we need to spend the most time at the general fund. But I think starting for a moment. Starting for a moment in the other funds and being able to go through some of those very quickly might be beneficial. And then we know that we're gonna spend the bulk of the time at the general fund. Because many of them are not all that much different, in the moment. So in your packets, I'm not sure what page that starts on, maybe page 5 or so. I don't know what the page number is.
Yes, that's correct. That's 5 is still general, so it would be the one right after 5.
And you should see Casino Riverboat in green in the first major title there. All of the fund and department headers are at the bottom of the sections. So Joe, go in by that pages there in your package, please. So what's wrong?
Correct?
The left-hand column of the page will say 0005 casino in the fund column. Okay. So this revenue is the casino revenue that you receive. And in this year's budget, you'll see in the capital outlay line toward the bottom of the fund that we've planned for $116,500 for 2025. That relates specifically to cash balance in the fund and some projects that we have listed in the capital plan. We have historically used some casino fund money for capital items. It's just been a matter of what the item is when it's come to be important. And so that number has varied over time a little bit as far as what is actually spent. But having a budget listed of 143,000 will be doable for you. That does use some cash reserves. We plan for about 70,000 in revenue each year, but we traditionally receive between 80 and 100. The only year that dipped lower than COVID in 2020 when that dropped. In 21, we went back up again to 81.6. And so I'm comfortable that we have that budgeted well. The only notation of things specific is that we have assigned then for the lobbyists specifically in aligning this fund. In the past, the lobbyists that the town has engaged haven't always necessarily been budgeted and identified ahead of time, and so it's always been a scramble to figure out where to pay it from. So we now have that situated, and it will be no surprise in the future.
Yeah.
In the past, there have been some police vehicle costs and equipment paid from Riverboat Casino, but with the public safety fund in place now, we can waiting for the door to slam. Okay. We can use that fund instead, not reducing the budget expenses, but simply reorganizing a little bit where they're assigned. The rainy day fund, again, we don't budget in that fund outside of $20,000 that we keep there as kind of an emergency fund spot. There is, I believe, a $53,000 balance in the fund. Just under 4,000, 53,971. The intention is not to use it, but we simply assign a budget number to it in case there's an emergency arises, and we don't have to wait then for a council hearing to spend some of that money. None of that would happen in a vacuum, obviously, but the debt service fund is listed next. That's for the GO bond, which pays off in 2026. Debt service is what that's called. That just says right there at right there at the top of that page.
This one?
Yeah. So the top of that page is the general obligation bond that was taken out in 2020. You'll have 2 years left to pay on that, 25 and 26. And then right below that in orange is the lease rental bond for the public safety building. However, we're not collecting levy, meaning property taxes on that yet, until 2027. It is listed here as a placeholder, but we will be paying the interest that's due on that bond from the CEDAT fund, which is the notation that you see there on the right side. In CEDAT right now, means we're paying it from the CEDAT fund. Community center building then is at the bottom half of that page. Those numbers are still entered as requested by the committee. You'll see it's just slightly higher by about $3,000 from this current year of 2024. I know they had discussions within their committee about trying to stimulate the revenue a little bit, and hopefully that will work well for them. You will see our 2025 budget number there is on the right side. The very first column left of that is your June 30th actual expenditure number. As we look down, for the most part, things are pretty well in order. Insurance has come in higher than what we had budgeted, but yet some other areas are coming in lower. So I don't know if we might need to have a discussion about changing that insurance budget line.
It does need to be increased. We have, Laura and I have a note of that.
Yeah, and so we're gonna need to look at some other area where there's a little bit of room to make an adjustment.
Cleaning service, we're gonna up to about 6,900. And
We have the claims
the dumpster,
and the dumpster too.
yeah.
So I've been watching those and trying to figure out how we
Okay,
can adjust those, but I think those are the three, if I'm not mistaken.
so do we know what the insurance quote will be for next year? We don't yet, right, Mark? They're still working on that.
Mark, do you have any idea for that?
We do not. I met with General Insurance last week. General Insurance is going to be quoting all the town's policies. So we have a comparison to what we're currently paying Michiana. And then I'm also looking at, and will be mentioned at Monday's council meeting, increasing the deductibles on our various facilities from $1,000 deductible to $5,000. That will bring down our annual policies as well. To include possibly looking at changing the deductibles on our automobiles as well, for cost savings. But for increases for 2025, I don't have those numbers yet. Waiting on the insurance companies.
Okay.
I've got more on through this. I've got the cleaning service.
I have the cleaning service at 6,900 and the dumpster at 5,600. And then whatever we decide for insurance, once we know whether we.
All right, so right now, if I put insurance at 12% higher, I'm sorry, let me say first. The insurance number of actual 9,544,
That's,
that's for the full year.
that's correct. For the full year will be, let's say, 4,500 plus an increase.
Oh,
Because it was,
Right.
Yeah, you're looking at-
Yes, through what the quarterly premium percentage was for the building, and she came back and gave me the annual. So
that's such good news.
it.
Okay, so on the expenditure then for June, I can put 4,500?
For insurance, well, plus.
maybe add 10% or 12%.
Yeah, I would say higher.
No, just June 30th expenditure.
Oh, for this June.
For this June should be,
I have
say, 4,500.
45, okay, all right, so much better. So the 58 that we had budgeted will be plenty because 12% above 4,500 is only $5,040.
Yeah, so we could.
Yeah, so that's good.
All right, so I'll leave that,
Or put it to.
I'll leave that 12% increase in.
Okay.
Now, right now, then, gas and electric, half of the year will come in almost right spot on. I'm a little concerned that next year might be need a little bit more, but, will there be a little bit of efficiency earned with the new unit that you're putting in?
Out of 23 units.
Oh, okay,
Yes, it will be, but I don't think anyone's,
Right.
it'll be a better product.
okay, so I'm gonna list the gas and electric at 37,000.
Okay.
Then with adding the 69 as the new number for cleaning service and the dumpster at 56, that brings the new total to 92,420. Meaning now we're $7,000 higher than this year,
Which is, would you call it 92?
92,420. So that there's a realistic,
Now miscellaneous, we've got we upped it from 6,000 to 8,000 and we've only used $100. So keep that in mind. I'm okay to possibly keep that if we think there's a good reason for what could be put there.
Joe, in the past, did you use your miscellaneous line? Well, you really didn't have that line specifically.
Right.
Because that's probably a difference right there. It's a good chunk of. I mean, we can come back to it too, but,
Can I ask a quick question?
sure.
Because I think we're a little bit different than the rest of the budgets. Is that what we've done is that we've kept it balanced budget.
Mhm,
In other words, our revenue is our expense.
mhm.
And does that give us any little gold stars to say that?
Yeah.
You're not digging into the money.
Yes,
Money's coming in and et cetera. And like I said, you're looking now to say, what we gotta do with the expenses. I don't know what we're gonna do with the revenue. We could raise the revenue there. But anyway, just a comment. But,
so in 2023, the revenue jumped up to $87,000 basically for the community center.
and where,
This year so far, through the end of June, you're at 49,000. So I do think if that revenue trend continues, that you can afford the 92 that you got listed here. Worst case scenario, if the revenue comes in at 90,000, because the board does watch carefully, they know that they just can't spend all that miscellaneous money. So I'm okay leaving it like this with that awareness that they're watching, and that'd be fine.
Joe, one of the things I would recommend that maybe we bring to the council in either October or November is looking at increasing the tenant rent by 3% starting in January of 2025.
And we were internally, we've been talking about that.
I would just ask that maybe,
Trying to come up with the number. The issue we've always had is, you know, we never took, and again, the building is getting bigger and more popular and everything else, but we never took it where we were there to make money, and we never did. As you look at some of the rents, they're nothing extraordinary, out of the question.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe, and we've tried to stay, but anyway, yeah, we can talk, we definitely will discuss.
My only comment on that is just, you know, heat and electric and expenses of what those rooms are being used for, if somebody's there all the time and what they're paying in rent.
Right.
Make it
You know,
proportional.
not to make money, but to not
Yeah,
lose money, you know.
yeah, to try.
Yeah, that's all.
But like I said, it's just the other, and we can talk.
Maybe at the September meeting, you could have a list of the last couple of years of the percentages of, that rents were raised, so that we all know where we're.
And when we're talking rent, is that including the YMCA? And how competitive are we? Just a thought,
Yeah,
because the Y has the Michigan City, the Port, and then our location.
But that would be helpful too, to know what the rents have been raised for the years.
the one thing that's coming on, if you bring it to why, is, we've given them a discount because they're working as part of the management of the building.
Right,
So that.
I just think it just requires an assessment after X amount of years being the same or how it's worked, that's all.
If we look at it every year.
Yeah, it's good.
Just remember that because that is a fee that this town is charging, it does have to run through resolution of the council to impose it, to start to charge it.
You lost me on that. So if we increase it, you mean?
I mean, hopefully there's a resolution on the books already stating what the fee is that's being charged presently from whatever many years ago that it was imposed.
Just for the Y?
Yeah,
And so
for
Yeah,
why? There's.
for all of the rent that's charged, it's a town fee. And so that needs to be by resolution, which is a super simple process.
Yeah, Deanna has to have somebody that's.
Okay.
Because, you know, you guys are keeping track, like, again, is the one thing I've never thought I've done with the building commission and with the community centers, we don't touch any money. And we don't collect the checks or anything else.
Right, that's not.
Everything
Yeah.
goes through you, and you should see what their amount is, and then anyone, so you have all of the information.
Right, okay, yeah, Mark's got used to it, so.
Okay, so it's almost 11:30. We better jump into the general fund then.
Okay, just let them know. The one that calls me the most probably, and it's not a big one, is the damn dumpster. And I don't know, it just, anyway. Well, I know, Mark, you guys have looked at it on the camera. But, and it's just somehow the letters are just like extra days ago, they'll throw in a big cardboard box.
Well, that should be addressed to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, the easiest solution is we can do like we did the street department, we put a padlock on it, provide every tenant with a key. And then they just have to have the inconvenience of undoing the padlock before they load it, and then that'll stop any outside dumping, just to suggest.
We could do something like that. We'll discuss it. Thanks.
Okay, in the general fund, the bottom of your page 6 maybe of the general fund gives you a total. And I'd like to start here for a moment. What page?
Just the last of the gym, so. We're sorry.
Page 5, okay.
Is that? In this.
So you see at the bottom, the current proposed 2025 column, far right side, lists 1.7 million. The adopted of 2024 was at 1.47 million. It's a 15.8% increase. Your property tax levy increase will be maxed out at 4%. Meaning your revenue growth from the general fund, which is property taxes, the main revenue, is not growing at that same 15.8% increase. Now, some other revenues, such as building permits or something, sometimes will grow more than 4%, but we cannot pass a budget that's $230,000 higher than this year. And again, we always start this way. We start with what department heads and committees are asking, and then look back through and kind of massage where we need to get to. I want to note there at the very bottom that you'll see a new section. It's my suggestion, Laurel and Megan, that I have discussed, having a separate department identified for the fire expenses of the town. In the past, there have just been various places where when things are needed to be spent on the fire department for supplies or what have you, that we find a place. But we need to be able to find the place within an identified place already that's waiting. So in talking with Blake 2 weeks ago now, I think it was, we've identified the areas you see listed there. There's possibly some areas still for some adjustment, but those are there on purpose and they're important to have. The gas electric that you see is our best guesstimate of what we think that building will need. Same for the water. The top line, the fuel, is what the town has always spent on fuel, attributable to the fire department expense. And so we just need to be able to list that and identify it and be able to track it moving forward so that we know how to plan. The bottom couple lines are in place for various things that might be needed in the building, various maintenance, the HVAC, annual checks, those kinds of things. And then the bottom wood equipment maintenance, various supplies and equipment that they may need assistance in purchasing. So does that increase the bottom line number? It does a little bit for gas, electric, for the water, but again, some of these other things are things that you have always paid for in different places already, and we're just pulling them down to identify. So I don't want anyone to have the misperception that all of a sudden we have this new building and we're now spending $34,000 extra that we didn't used to spend, because that would be an incorrect assumption in total. So let's move back to page 1 then and go through it department by department. The clerk's office on the first page, and I'll defer now to Meg and Laurel for any comments that they have on what's where and why it's the way that it's listed.
My only comment, which I kind of talked with you, is just brainstorming on what can be put other places. So portions of salary, potentially, we talked about some of possibly mine going into the water fund, for example. Our computer software maintenance has just increased substantially over the last 2-3 years. I'm still analyzing that on all the various things we're paying and if we can make any improvements. You know, I was looking into Keystone. But for the time being, what we have it at, in the past, we expensed some accounting services, some legal expenses. The computer software should probably stay with the town. It is the town expense. So those are all items that have increased. Accounting services, you know, I would hope that could lessen over time. That's my goal. That's, I know we have the blessing of the council to utilize what we need, but that is a big expense and will continue to be an expense next year. So, I'm just quickly analyzing the larger things that are in here.
And in 2023, 22, maybe a little bit in 24 also. Accounting services line, for example, some of those have been paid from other funds. And right now, we're trying to pull it back into one location and then seeing if. we
Right,
can
but
continue or not.
that is a big, you know, those are big pieces of our increases, along with insurance and utilities. We're gonna get the garbage numbers, which actually will increase about 2%, mark things. So won't be that's not gonna be a huge increase from what we have it at currently. We actually got a large credit because they were charging us early within the contract for this year. So we got about $4,000 back. 4,500 maybe. So, whereas for next year, we'll have it budgeted properly, but again, that's not gonna increase. It might increase the following 2 years though, depending on what council decides to do.
One item that I do want to point out that Mike might not be quite as comfortable talking about is the very first line, her salary. It has historically been budgeted 50,000 for many years, but I think that was put there in case council ever decided to increase as a clerk maybe was going to become more full-time in their role. You'll see the budget is listed right now at 70 for next year based on requests from the town administration office. Based on the Human Resource Committee discussing whether that salary ordinance spot should be changed in the future. So as you see, that amount listed there is not been a decision made of any kind. It's simply budgeting ahead for some room for the conversations that are happening. And that number certainly can be adjusted as we work through the next 2 months process.
I think we need to have some other salary discussions as well.
Right.
And I don't know if we want to set up on how that's been done in the past with the salary ordinance, getting to the point where we need to do that? Or can we do that on our own?
Well, once the committee and council start to settle in on, the first question for everybody always is, can we afford a raise? And then the second part is, if so, how much should it be for all town employees? That then gets put into the salary ordinance. And I'm not really sure where the HR committee falls into those conversations here in Long Beach, but. I'm looking at page
Yeah.
2 then.
It has not been discussed yet in HR.
No, and I think out of this coming Monday's council meeting, the discussion will be held as far as the preparation of the salary ordinance going into the September meeting. Then typically what occurs is between the town attorney, my office and the clerk's office, we begin to put together some numbers to add to the council. So then the council can start making that decision, hopefully by the October, no later than November meeting. I think as far as the budget numbers, as we prepare the 2025 budget, the majority of the departments we've already budgeted in and anticipated raise in there, correct, Trista? I believe it was at 3%. We factored that in and we begin to advertise.
Let me just verify.
I know when I look at, like, for example, the police department salaries, the numbers that I provided to Laurel on that were factored in both for the 3% raise and then to include the 2 promotional merit increases that we have before the council on Monday.
The worksheet right now has entered what people have asked for. I did not, I'm sorry, add my understanding or add my extra column to be able to play with those percentages. I'll get that situated so I can answer that better answer that question next time.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, you know, in all the positions that we have within the town that we budgeted for the 3%. So if the council decides to do that, then it's budgeted in there.
I know that all the salary lines are budgeted now with a higher value.
Okay.
It's just a matter of whether, and I do have unallocated funds. Right now, for example, in the motor vehicle fund, we have a 4% raise listed in the budget. And again, it's always better to advertise a little bit higher.
And I remember in one of our previous meetings, you had discussed about advertising higher at the 4%. And then I think out of some of our discussion out of HR, I know JD's thoughts are, we use kind of a COLA increase of around 3 to 3.2%, and we kind of all settled on 3%.
Yeah, I recommend that is where you settle.
Yeah.
I think that will be doable for you. I would be concerned about the 4%.
I would agree.
Page 2 of the general fund then, is, town administration. You'll see a little bit of an increase in the social security number, and I still want to go back and look with, Megan Laurel about that. The intention, so that the lit public safety fund can be used efficiently and across some various items that we'd like to keep in there, across police and fire, would mean that Mark's social security and PERF would stay in the general fund. It's really just a matter of 1 + 1 = 2. And so that's why the budget number is a little higher than it is for this year. You'll see though that the PERF number is a little bit lower. And, we'll come back and look at that and make sure that it's all appropriate.
Trista, what did you factor in for health insurance and increase for next year?
12%.
Thank you. And still, that's an unknown right now, but I would hope it would be no greater than that.
And you see we've spent 46.
Right.
The number listed there for the health insurance is keeping street and water insurance in their own funds.
Also, street gets their own health insurance loan.
Right, yeah, street and water. Just for your information, if you've got a color copy, the red boxes and some of that olivey green color are what related to the pullout for the fire department. Listing there at the bottom that we looked at already. And Megan Laurel, do you have anything else to add about the town admin part?
The PERF, I believe that can come down to like 15,750. Or I'm sorry, health insurance, the HSA. Based on who will be receiving that next year.
Oh, the HSA?
Yep,
I'm sorry, what was it, 15 what?
750, 15,750.
Okay, that's helpful, it's 10,000.
Yeah, and then coming down to the gas and electric town, you put a $35,000 budget there, but we determined because we're gonna have the building, public safety building, keeping those at, the same amount, 25. So be 25 and 8,000, but I don't know if you move that public safety budget for the gas and electric to your new line.
Yeah, it's at 15 down below. You think 15 is too high? We don't know.
Yeah, so let's leave that, but you can change the 35 to 25, yeah.
But isn't the 8 becoming 0?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Now that, because you have it over here to, the other location.
okay. One other point to note, you'll see a line titled administration right toward the bottom of the page, budgeted at 100,000. That number is there for two reasons. One, because there are some times that things come up, such as an emergency AC unit, for example, where the town administration needs some funds available to handle something like that. You'll see for this year, it ended up at a zero budget because we couldn't afford to do that. I do suggest, definitely at least for today, that we leave that 100 there, see how the rest of the budget works. If we maybe need to make that 50 or something, that'd be fine. But I do think it's important to keep a value in it. We will, whatever number we settle at, we will still keep 100 there to cause the advertisement to be high on purpose, knowing that we'll take it back out. If we're able to afford to leave at 100, that's great. I suspect that maybe that's gonna probably drop down maybe to 20 or 30 ultimately, but I'm hoping we can leave something in it. That building and fixed equipment line then was in anticipation then of further AC unit issues and thermals here in town hall.
So how much is that adding to our 15% overage right now?
Well, $120,000, so about half of the overage. The overage is about 230. So, yeah, a significant chunk for sure.
We'll talk about that later for my own understanding better, but okay.
The next page then is building commission and BZA. You see a significant increase listed in the clerical assistant line. The number listed at 45,760 is as requested by your building commissioner. And as I understand it, there's still, I think, needs to be resolved some conversation on full-time versus part-time. So I do expect this number will change in some fashion. As well, during that conversation needs to be noted that the number requested includes a significant raise. As well, that same human being paid from that line, there's a portion of the salary listed in the MS4 line in the stormwater fund. So there's several things going on with that number that will need to be evaluated going forward.
Also, just on the building inspector, is that based on the request by Larry?
Yes.
Okay, because my understanding that the first year an employee does not get a raise, so that would come down to them.
Okay.
Also, health insurance is going to be discussed for the building inspector, so.
So is
That's
that,
not in the budget currently.
is that human full-time right now? I'm sorry, I don't know the name.
No, Carter Rivas,
Carter, okay, so he's part-time right now.
correct, because he's can only work up to 30 hours. So these are the salary items that need to be discussed.
In another areas of consulting engineer we have in there, we can probably reduce that to 5,000 for now. In the past, it's been one of those things that we use it occasionally. We used it some time ago for the large project off Shorewood. But that's an area there that could have $5,000 in savings too.
So should I list it as 5,000 today?
I would, yes.
Okay.
Is that one on Larry's sheet? Is that one?
Yeah, yeah, these are all his numbers.
Okay.
You see BZA secretary is listed at 0. That's at Meg's request and suggestion. In an effort to evaluate general fund money and what do we really need where. Because the clerk's office is responsible for taking those minutes. It's no I don't know when it was or wasn't changed, but it's no longer paid to a part-time person, so. Which I guess maybe used to be Meg, right? And then an amount assigned, of course, for legal services. Police department is next. You note that Mark is working for free next year.
Yeah, our dreams.
That is a zero because his salary is assigned to the public safety fund. We had conversation last year as the fund was starting on how do we want to use that public safety fund? It's a new certain revenue that needs to be reserved only for public safety purposes, police and fire. And what is the best way to budget for it? To use it to the town's best benefit, both for the citizens and for the town administration. Responsible decisions. As well as, thankfully, it does help free up the general fund a little bit for some other things. And so the easiest way, math related, the way the other pieces were falling together in the puzzle was to just put Mark's entire salary there. It is nice within the accounting system to be able to have that distinction. We can divide up a person's salary across a variety of funds and just assign the system to do percentages. I think it keeps it more simple though. It works for a person to be in a fund for the whole year. But that's why it's at zero right now, because he is planned again for 25 to be in the public safety fund.
He also is in street and,
Yeah, but the police portion.
no, I,
Yeah.
but.
Yeah, okay. No, wait, take it. And then the numbers listed, I'll defer the rest of any comments to Mark. These all come from him.
Well, I have to run out, but I'll be back if you're still here. So, are you still on?
Mark, you have to leave soon too, right? So,
I 12:30 would be the latest.
Oh.
I just bumped the other thing I had to do, so.
okay.
One question I have, maybe Laurel, you can answer this. The reimbursement we're getting on overtime when our officers are working the, traffic grants,
So,
the OPO,
yeah, we're getting those, sir.
right? And you guys are tracking that separate account and then we're moving that back into the general at some point?
It's actually in the general, in the line item.
Okay,
Well, that actually goes into, their actual salary, but then it comes in as income
okay,
to you.
very good.
And that's, I mean, good to see out of that.
Yeah, we're still working on that. Okay. But aside from that, Tristan, the only thing I have to add on the police department side is, a lot of the numbers stayed pretty consistent to the 2024. There were a few increases, like $5,000 more to the, police overtime. Obviously, a lot of that is because of the traffic enforcement grants, trying to have a better presence on the lakefront, both on the water and on the beach, on the busier weekends and that, and then obviously with the increase in salaries. Aside from that, I had no large, jumps on anything.
A comment real quick on salaries. Verify for me that the chief marshal or the chief deputy spot, the budget for 25 is less than the budget for 24, but it is also less than doubling the 24 actual. But that's because with the retirement and then the retirement payout,
Right.
subbing in the replacement person gets us to 77.5.
Yes, the replacement, the newly appointed sergeant is, 6 years longevity compared to almost 27 years longevity. So therefore that individual is making a considerable amount less, although will be receiving hopefully a pay increase here soon, but that'll be appropriate for that position, yes. So
And then the 203 for the other deputies, is incorporated in the base.
for 3 of the deputies, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then we reduced longevity, down to 1,700. Obviously losing the employee with almost 27 years longevity took a big chunk of that away. And so then that's decreased. And then the rest pretty much stayed the same. There was like a $500 increase in garage and motor supplies just because tires and oil and everything else has gotten more expensive. But aside from that, no large jumps. $1,000 more on software. We went from 14,000, 15,000 for our software, for our records management system and that.
You see a decrease in the vehicle insurance line, which is about 7 up from the bottom. Approximately 8 up, maybe. Not because the cost has gone down, but just because we're trying to organize things a little better in that regard. And so that cost is just listed in the other insurance in the town admin fund. All right, so with the couple changes we've talked about already, you have successfully reduced today by, what's your total? 7 what? I should keep a running list here.
1703 Did we need a download?
So I'm taking out 24,000, which is good. We're down to 14.19% high compared to last year. And again, you know, a little bit higher than last year is good. We expect that. We've identified already some areas where we think there's additional to cut from what the proposals were. And so overall, we're in decent shape. There's just a little bit more tweaking that will need to happen. Marcus, you can stay for a while. We can switch them to the other miscellaneous funds,
Sure.
unless anyone has any more comment on the general fund. So we were just getting ready to look at the motor vehicle fund, which would come next after the community center fund we were looking at. I'm going right in order so that Joe, you're on a good page there.
Thank you.
I think you guys have all, yeah.
I went to the last page.
We're on page 4.
Page 12, right in this.
Numerical, okay. So motor vehicle, the very top line is town administration salary. There's a little bit that Mark receives in his overall salary from a few other places. This is one of them. And it is appropriate to use some other funds, such as the motor vehicle fund, to cover some of his town administration role because he's supervising those people in those projects. The number listed there is a 4% increase presently. The motor vehicle fund is funded by gas tax and also for the town of Long Beach, some property taxes. I do expect that the salaries in this fund will be the same increase as, you know, the rest of the town employees, which would affect that number I just gave you as well. So right now, as you look at then the superintendent and the laborer salaries, those are presently at a 4% calculation as well. Longevity is increased for the appropriate value. Insurance is presently listed at the 12% increase. That is for the health insurance for those employees. Excluding Mark, yeah, the rest of the employees. And the HSA at 3,800, I think is appropriate as well for what the expected family member type.
Well, and
value
this
is.
is prorated to into stormwater or garbage.
Ah, yes, okay, yeah, thank you. You'll see PERF comes out here as well, according to the fact that they're paid from here, which is appropriate. Most of the rest, there's a small increase for salt, just planning ahead for inflation. Salt is paid for from 2 places. This is one of them. And the rest is pretty well steady. I guess street alley repair, we did increase a little bit for some striping planning. And then in the restricted part of the MVH fund, there's $25,000 planned toward paving, which is included in the capital plan. 495 might be a little bit high. I'm gonna double check with you guys, I'm talking. The state releases for us, last year it was on August 7th. The state releases the revenue prediction for the gas taxes. They're not out yet today. It's based on a prior 3-year rolling average. So we will know very soon, within the next day or two, if that 495 is an attainable number, or not. And I'll report back to the group after that, but recall that because you do receive property taxes to this fund, we do know that there will be some increase in revenue due to that portion. Below that, police continuing education fund is really the same, kind of as it always is. That receives some revenue each year, which Mark watches to make sure that he spends within that amount. Park and Rec is next. Top of your next page, probably. The other portion then of the town administrator salary is listed at the top. And these numbers that you see here are listed from the Parks Committee. They came in pretty well, comparable to this year. They were $1,500, well, $1,400 more in their proposed budget, but I don't see any reason that that will be a problem. They shifted a couple things around. Reduced the tree care just a tad, and made an increase in the insurance, a couple other small places. Their spending right now, you see, is on track, just at 37,000 only at the end of June. Of course, July and August are their big expenses with their payroll for the parks program. So that number will jump here at the end of August. But I do think that that expenditure value is supported by the revenues that will be expected. Recall that they also receive property tax as their major revenue source. And we expect that for 2025, after circuit breakers, to come in at probably about 170,000, maybe just slightly higher than that. So it is important for their park program to support the rest of their expenses through the revenue that they earn. The last several years, it's come in between 25 and 30,000. But I know they do a good job of making sure that they only spend within what they have. This budget also includes, you'll see the improvement line of 80,000. So the first place that they don't spend from, if their revenue does not support it, is that improvement line. But that 80,000 is there ready and waiting for them for their various projects and improvements that they have. Again, I'm comfortable budgeting it a little bit higher than what we think the revenue might be, just in case they are able to stimulate their revenue. Then it's there waiting for them. The CCI fund, cumulative capital improvement, you see in parentheses, cigarette tax, is a cigarette tax that the town receives. It's minimal, teeny tiny. There's no sense right now budgeting for it. If there is something that is needed to be spent from there, which typically would be a technology type item for town administration, such as a new server or something, we would have that fund available. There's a current cash balance at the end of June of $15,000. And so it's a good little spot to hold back for this electronic type improvement that you would need to do at some point in the future, and not budgeting for it so that it can be held there waiting for you. Cumulative capital development should be next in your listing. That is funded by property taxes. It's a separate fund though, and a separate portion of your property tax. And it comes in specifically for capital type items. It's pursuant to state statute. You see that it's all reserved for capital and paving. But in the past, we have used it to pay off the old school roof loan, which has now been retired and paid off. So we can adjust where that expense went. In 2024, some of it was used for public safety building. And so now you can see that we can shift, as is related in the capital plan, that 150 toward general capital items and 200 toward paving projects. Those are certainly flexible across themselves too. If it turns out you want to use some of what's reserved in the capital outlay line by title for paving, that's perfectly fine, that it's interchangeable. And the number listed there will be supported both by your expected taxes next year that you'll receive, as well as a little bit of cash balance, by the way. The next fund from there is your CDIT fund. We traditionally have paid the fire, the contract with the volunteer fire department from this fund. It is in blue right now because we're going to look at that in comparison to the lit public safety fund. It is listed right now at 50,000, which is an increase from prior years based on conversation that Mark and Meg and I had with Blake, which is an ongoing conversation. So I don't want this $50,000 number to be perceived or assumed as a final value, but we certainly needed some kind of placeholder there. Below that, you see just above the green line, the lease rental interest, $69,000. That is the interest that will be due on the public safety building bond that I mentioned earlier today is paid from somewhere else. This is the somewhere else. The car lease and police equipment are listed at 0 in blue because those are also put into the public safety fund. And then you see some tree maintenance and also some paving money reserved in the CDIT fund at 110,000, also related into the capital plan. The 286 will be supported by the revenue that we expect to receive. Again, at literally any minute, the state should be releasing that number for us. It is a portion of your income tax that you receive. Then should be next on your list is the lit public safety fund. Again, that new income tax that we started receiving last year. You'll see that Mark's police portion of the salary is there. You'll know that the fire contract is listed at 0. That's because we just saw that in the CDIT fund. But that here, the police equipment number is listed at 60. That would be for 4 police leases and body cams. And Mark, that might be about $3,000 shy. We'll just talk about that. But one of the leases that's included on the capital plan list is one that would come up next year for some kind of replacement or renewal. So there's a little bit of variation there possible in the number. We also will find out, I mentioned that by the state's prediction on the revenue. This is another one that any minute now we'll what to expect this revenue to be. And so we'll be able to zero on that more tightly. American Rescue Plan is not listed. The money was the one-time receipt a couple of years ago, where you'll recall, we did not expect to receive any more. And the last of those proceeds were spent in the last of the public safety bills. So that fund is there just as a historical reference, but we probably really can hide it once we're done with this budget process because it's all finished up now. Police donation fund. Again, Mark watches closely what donations they do receive, so he knows what he can spend. This is budgeted a little bit higher than what revenues might be currently, but we do know also that there's some activity in the works for that second line, the marine unit expense. So Right now it's listed at 15. Mark, if you think for the budget purpose, we should list it higher because you're expecting more activity, we can. If you want to wait and do additional appropriation later, we can. I know it's kind of a,
I think 15 is appropriate enough.
okay. All right, then we're into water, which is a little bit longer. You'll see the budget in total is, more than half, only half of what this year's is, and that's because the large $700,000 project is finished and we don't need the budget for it again. I do though want to look a little bit better at the money that is transferred each month for the water bond and how that may or may not play in here to what we list as the budget. I'll talk with Laurel and Meg about that a little bit more. But the numbers that you see are what were presented to you, and don't know that I really have a lot of other comment on it.
Just a question. Just on the bottom of the bond principal. So we're paying 315. How many more do we have? That's the annual 315, so how many more 315?
That-
A couple of years
That water's paid off in 26.
in 26.
Yeah,
You don't think?
I'm not sure.
I'm
I think pretty sure that means it's.
pretty sure.
Right. Like that's in the middle of whatever year, so, yeah. I thought it was due 2026. Something. Yeah, I need to go 26 or 27. Okay. And I should know. Yeah. I should.
I can look it up here real quick while we're talking a moment.
Just a question, and then I won't belabor it. Are we deciding that once that's paid off, I think somebody brought it up last meeting, that we should still charge something on the water bill?
That will be a conversation and decision that will absolutely need to be made. As it comes closer to that, and that decision I think will be best informed for you all by knowing what the state of the current infrastructure is, and what future projects you may need to look at to know whether you need to continue charging a fee for those things and build up some cash or not.
Okay.
I know I have reference on that bond. I couldn't find it super quick, but I do think it's in 2026.
No problem. We could find that one.
Okay. Below that then is your stormwater fund. Recall that there's a monthly fee as the revenue that comes into that. And in 23, the revenue for that was 228,000. In 2022, it was 203,000. And this year, we're projecting that you'll receive 227,000. It has worked well with at least part of the intention for the fund, and that it was able to build cash for you after paying some of its expenses over a few years. And you were able to use that this year then for a large stormwater project to the tune of over $400,000. And we would expect that again moving forward. We do have a capital line listed at 70 in case there are some things that need to be fixed or improved upon in the infrastructure of the stormwater. But again, letting that balance build then for the next year or two will be a good thing. So there are some expenses listed here, which is what Meg was referring to earlier. You'll see salary listed at the top spot. That's in relation to part of Andre's payroll as part of what she handles with some of the planning things related to the stormwater planning as well, with permits and stuff with new building and improvements. And then we've got listed there for MS4 coordinator and consulting engineer in the middle. It was budgeted for this year as well, although so far there hasn't been any money spent on them. There is a need for some review every so often for an MS4 coordinator, meaning a contractual person who comes in and makes sure that the town is in compliance with the state mandates. That's also the purpose of having the engineer spot, that the state mandates, as you know, the council just passed the ordinance here not too long ago to try to get in compliance with that. Unfortunately, it's an unfunded mandate by the state, and so they expect all of you towns and cities to comply with their rules, but they don't provide you money to do so. Part of the stormwater fee revenue can be used to do those things, which is why you have a spot holding for them. The last fund that is the garbage fund. We do assign some payroll there for the two guys so that, you know, part of their job obviously involves work with leaf pickup and kind of just monitoring garbage pickup, although I know that the company contract with handles that part, but so that's why a small portion of their salary is here as well. Monthly fee, of course, that residents pay. Your major expense in this fund is, of course, that you'll see it toward the bottom, scavenger service is what the title's been for a long time. I think that might need to increase a tad, but Margaret, I don't know if you have a comment on the 220.
Yeah. I have a proposed contract extension for next year and it's going up by 2%. Currently we pay $15.95 a household. It'll go to $16.27 a household. So, Meg can then take that number times the number of households to, get your annual payment to Republic Services.
Okay, so are we needing to increase the fee to the homeowners then, or are we going to, because I think that's been all studied for some years, right?
That's gonna be up for discussion on Monday at the council meeting. I sent them an email today. I copied you as well to see about, you know, future discussion of increasing that. And then I did a comparison to what another town's currently charging their residents.
So yeah, just that same reminder, if we're changing the fee, then we need to do the resolution as you've already identified, so. The leaf removal is the other large portion for this fund. Of course, that's not spent much yet because it's only August, and so, we think the 85 is a good.
Quick question. I see the 305 is what the cost is for to scavenging.
Yeah,
And so we're roughly 50, although when we charge on the bills, do we normally just do close to the 305? Or do we get more, from the customers?
We can charge an administrator fee. So if we're paying, let's say $15.95 currently to Republic, and that obviously we charge a little bit more to the residents because we have administrative fees that we have to incur in-house as well. So
I just wonder if we're breaking even with the residents or not.
yeah,
We get a little bit extra.
I would
Cost.
do that. Just
probably that.
To need this, but
leave is 10 a month, and then 16.59, I think, is what we charge for garbage right now.
We don't have those two line items to connect the money.
I need water go right.
I thought there.
No, I thought it was. We have two, we have stormwater and cleaning garbage and.
Okay, so the leaking garbage is all.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying, just use that number, then it's 305 with cost, so then. Does that only collect at least, hopefully at least 305?
Yes,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, that's all. We.
Yeah, the revenue, the revenue the last couple of years comes in right about 340,000 for the fund.
So that would be all close to the real.
Right. Yeah,
Which is greater.
yeah, so with the other administrative expenses that are listed in the budget, then it's pretty close.
Okay.
So that's the end of the list of funds. I think hopefully it's been informative. I think we've identified a couple areas, again, that we need to look at a little bit further before I'm saying for voting, but, Meg and Laurel are certainly working on, narrowing in on the insurance, making sure that we budget for the expense and don't budget too high, because that is an expense that we can figure, leaving then some extra for other places and, trying to make sure that it's all really well organized as it was compared to a few years back. So I think overall we'll be in pretty good shape for you.
Thank you.
And you can chat.
Suggest, and I don't know what the rate is, it's getting close to 12:30. I was gonna try to get out by 12:30.
Mhm.
Mark, you had mentioned that you were trying for 12:30.
I can,
Agenda wise, pretty well done.
yeah, I'd say in Meg's absence, we just covered the 2025 budget. Under unfinished business, cash, reserves, investment strategy for 2024. I know in my conversation with Meg the other day, she's been in conversations with Horizon Bank. And then Trista, if you want to add to that, I guess. Oh, there we go.
You're just back. We're almost done. Yeah, it's fun. Tell you one thing, that's. Yeah.
We just got to that, so you can start on.
Wonderful. Okay, so
We have to say.
I had opened our Trust Indiana account and set up the sub accounts. And then I let Horizon Bank know that Trust Indiana may reach out to them, which is what Trust Indiana had told me. Horizon Bank, Karen Koff, who's been our contact for, I think, a lot of years, came back. I didn't ask her to do this, she just did it. Our current checking account interest rate is at 3.4%. She offered to up it to 4.75% on all of our funds in our town checking account. I did call her after discussion with Trista, Mark, and Laurel, and I think we've decided, even though this is a lower percentage than Trust Indiana, that we are going to keep the funds at Horizon and just go with this increased rate. Karen's getting back to me on our two water accounts, which are our capital and our operating. Our checking account currently has, I think, 3.1 or 2 million in it. The capital has 567,000, the operating has 416,000, so a little under $1 million in both of those. It sounds like she probably will be able to get that rate, but I'm still waiting to hear back from her on the two water accounts. So that being said, talking through Trista, even if I put, as much cash as we felt comfortable putting into Trust Indiana, we could still get this return on all of our funds potentially at the bank. So I think it's just a better, saves us from having to keep track of what I would move over. I think it's quite generous of Verizon to want to keep our business, keep working with us. We have a good relationship. So that's what unfolded with that. Clearly, if anyone has a strong opinion that, Tristan and I did a somewhat quick calculation on, it is a 0.5% difference potentially from the 5.3, which is what Trust Indiana lingers around, to this 4.75. It would be a couple $100 a month over a year. But again, that's dependent upon how much money I would have in Trust Indiana at any one point.
And the rest of your cash balance is still at the lower rate.
Right.
The two really will balance out, and I think you're in a better position overall.
So that's Trista's input, which is excellent. greatly appreciated, yeah.
I really trust your judgment, and I do think it's important, especially nowadays, to have a relationship with the bank. I mean, it's
Well,
probably.
Mark said he just met with someone from her, or talked with somebody the other day at an event who we might, we're gonna clearly be doing additional financing in the future with Verizon, so.
Yeah.
I spoke to Bill Gertner the other day with Horizon Bank and, inquired about the fire truck financing for January next year. And Horizon is definitely interested in quoting, that particular purchase. And I agree with what Meg's recommending, that we stay with Horizon Bank, and would even further maybe recommend, as you put out the agenda for the council, maybe just to put that on the agenda to update the council as well, because I think they'll support it as well.
And I did, Karen did change the rate, which I'll confirm, but I talked with her on Monday afternoon, and she was going to change it. Again, letting me know about the water accounts. And this is dependent on the market, so there's no guaranteed rate,
You could locate them,
Correct.
so.
So if the rate drastically, and Karen did say she would, because of this arrangement we're making right now, this change in the rate on our account, that when the market does change, that she would kind of, our account would be one of the last ones that would be phased with the change. So
So
she did kind of guarantee that.
the ebbs and flows may be a little bit less severe than some others. That's good too.
Yeah, she did say to me on the phone.
Okay.
There's no paperwork for me to sign. She just was gonna make that change based on our discussions, her and I.
Okay.
So that's my update on that, which I thought was a pretty good outcome, really, so. Rainy day fund, I think we're still working.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, the rest of the unfinished business needs to even be discussed today, but.
Yeah, okay. Anything new that, and you guys may have discussed, but do we have anything to add to the council agenda from this meeting for the budget with those, when we need to approve items? So the meeting's on the 12th. Deanna's going to be getting and we can talk about that after this meeting, but Deanna's going to be getting the agenda out.
Yeah, today.
So
The furnace is on there.
I just mean for our actual budget timeline. Is there anything that needs to be done this month in
Maybe
August?
just to have a spot to allow council asking questions about the budget numbers if they want to. Knowing that the next meeting in September will be the public hearing and the first reading. Of course, the vote on the budget doesn't happen until October. But I think maybe just to have a placeholder to allow, again, any questions, once you and I finish up any contributions from today, we'll send everyone copies so they can look at it and.
I think that's the most important thing, Trista, is getting them the email copies so they can at least say that they had a chance to look it over.
Yeah.
I really would encourage them to listen to the meeting, but.
So we're gonna work on that today.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
listen to today was a great idea.
Right.
and I would just like to announce those dates to them so that they are all aware.
Yeah.
Because all of us know that they haven't been, privy to that info. Okay. Anything else, anybody? All right, and we will adjourn at 12:31.
Next meeting date?
Oh, next meeting date, okay. So our next regular meeting would be the 4th at 1 p.m., I believe.
I will be at a training conference that week. I
So,
mean, you can still have the meeting, I just won't be available. I'm available the following week on the 11th.
Let's go for that. That's okay.
there's that for the council meeting is on the
Right.
12th.
Yeah,
And are we okay with that?
as long as we have these numbers, it won't be included in the agenda.
Council meeting will be on
Or
the,
sorry, no.
the council meeting will be on the 9th.
On the 9th, okay, so that would be after the council meeting.
So we usually try to get the budget finance before, so.
Mark, could you just leave a memo or some info with Meg?
Yeah.
Let's do that and just leave it. Yeah.
Okay, so September 4th at 1 PM is our next meeting. And then if we need a follow-up, we can.
We can do that.
Yeah. Because we said at that September meeting is the public hearing and first reading of the budget.
Right. Yeah, but no decisions are made that day.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the later days that Monday.
Yes, the second it is.
Actually, we have a community center meeting scheduled, so we'll let that move or change. Okay. Okay. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.